10, Part 3, we're going to be looking at the historical present now. Finally, something that's easy. The idea of the historical present is that the present tense can be used to describe the past, basically as a past tense. So in the text for today, we're going to see a sentence. Louis says, so that's the King Louis the 16th. The numbers are always written in Roman numerals for kings. So Louis says, s'applique, that means to apply oneself, à la politique intérieure, uh, um, to the domestic policy. Politique is politics or policy. Intérieur would be domestic or interior. So, so literally it says Louis XVI applied himself to domestic policy or applies himself to domestic policy, but the text is written to describe something that happened hundreds of years ago. So it's written, but it's written all in the present tense. So this is what's known as the historical present. So we can translate it as Louis XVI applied himself to domestic policy, or Louis XVI invested himself in domestic policy. And so it's kind of interesting when you translate it. We can kind of do this in English, but it's not nearly as common in English as in French. So for this course, what I would say is if it's written in the historical present, either translate everything in the present, and we'll use it as a historical present in English, or be consistent and translate it into the past, so it would come out as a regular English narrative. But the key is to be consistent. Don't alternate between the present and the past when it's all written in the historical present. So the key is that within a text, when you translate, there needs to be consistency in the use of the past tenses, just like in French, when you write something in the past, there needs to be a consistency too. And so there's three styles of past tense narratives in French. There's the historical present, where it's a present only. And this is a lot of times in school books, they'll do this, even up through high school. They'll present a historical narrative using the historical present because it's just a lot easier to read. Plus, it makes it more lively. Oh, so Louis the 16th does this, and he does this, and then he does this. That makes it more interesting to read. Now you can have the historical narratives that are not too formal, and they'll use the passé composé and the imperfect. Those are the same tenses that people use in speaking. Now we haven't looked at the imperfect yet. That'll be in the next chapter, but that's the not too formal. And then the more formal text is where we use the passé simple, the passé composé as a perfect tense. He has gone to some place. Not as he went, because passé simple would be that. And the imperfect. You would use all the past tenses together in the more formal historical narrative. So just as French needs to be consistent, you need to be consistent in your translation. Now let's look at present participles. Those are words ending in ing in English. We've looked at past participles, words ending in ed. Now we're going to look at present participles, words ending in ing. And so here's an English sentence where we've got a number of ways that we use present participles. Suffering, I am talking while walking. So here suffering is describing me. I am talking, we're using that, saying what I'm doing right now. While walking, there's simultaneity going on there. So we use ing words in a variety of different ways, the present participles. And the formation in French is that we use the present tense new form, first person plural, the present tense, and replace the ons with ant. And that's just a pretty regular general rule that we'll use. Nous parlons, the present participle for speaking would be parlons. Nous finissons, we're finishing. Finissons would be finishing. Nous vendons, we sell. Vendons would be selling. So ANT, basically translate that as an ing, and you'll get the idea of what's going on. So let's try these. I'll read the present participles, and you say out loud what you think they are. Parlons, that'd be speaking. Finissons, finishing. Mangeons would be eating. Now notice how we have this extra E there, and we put that E in there so that the G stays soft. If it's just, there's no E, it would be mangon, and that's not the word. You say mangeons. So French will stick in extra letters to keep the vowel having the right sound when the conjugations don't really wouldn't necessarily create the right sound otherwise. Now there are some irregular participles. Être is étant, and we can see that et stem with ant. Avoir is ayant, very irregular, and savoir is sachant. So you need to memorize these to recognize what they are because they're irregular and they're not based on the new form of the present. So how are we going to use them? Well, first of all, let's look how we can use them as an adjective. C'est une femme charmante. So it is a woman. Now here we have charmante. Charmer is the verb to charm. Charmant is charming, and it's used as an adjective. This is a charming woman. And so charmant is a word used all the time as a very um, very general word to indicate a positive evaluation. So c'est une femme charmante. It's a charming woman. Now notice that since it's une femme, it's feminine, so we put the e on the past participle. So we've got the ant, but when used as an adjective, that would be masculine singular, so we add the e. So the rule is the present participle agrees in gender and number when used as an adjective, like here, except if it has a direct object. Then it's invariable and we just use the masculine singular. So let's look at this sentence, which is quite different. C'est une femme charmante les serpents. So it is a woman. Now here we've got charming, charmant, but there's a direct object, charming the snakes. So so this is just like, oh, she's charming. This is a woman who's doing snake charming. So it's a woman charming the snake. So there's a direct object there, and the present participle is invariable. It doesn't agree in gender and number. Now we can also use past participles as nouns. With suivre, the past participle is suivant, so that's to follow. So le suivant is the following one, the next one. Could be a follower. If you're standing in line at IKEA for customer service and they've given out numbers and you're number 417 and they're at 318, they'll call out, le suivant, 319. So that would be the next one. It could also be a suivant as someone who's a follower of something. Survivre is to survive. Les survivants is the survivors. Now, it's interesting. Survivre is a very strong word in French. We talk about, oh, I survived a boring lecture. No, they wouldn't say that in French. You survive a massive shooting at a school or something like that. It's barely coming out alive. It's not used in a figurative sense like it is in English. So it's a very strong word, not used in a weak figurative sense. Incroyant That comes from croire, that's the present participle. So that's a believer. So a typical saying in French, people how they describe the typical French person would describe their religion. Je suis croyant, mais pas pratiquant. We've got two present participles there. I'm a believer, but not practicing. And with like uh, professions, religions don't have an article. So je suis croyant, I'm a believer, mais pas pratiquant, but not practicing. Now, often present participles will be preceded by un, or sometimes tout un. And it can be translated as while or by or upon. And the key idea is that two things are happening simultaneously. And tout temps is used to intensify the simultaneity. So, en parlant, elle oublie ses difficultés. So, while speaking, she forgets her difficulties, or she forgets about her difficulties. So the idea is that, well, while she's talking, she forgets about all of her difficulties. En écoutant, j'apprends beaucoup de choses. By listening, écouter is to listen. J'apprends, I learn many things. By listening, I learn many things. And so the idea is that these things are happening simultaneously. So here's an exercise, 5 sentences, write down your translation, and then go on to the next video when you've finished.